Don't play with it, don't be dishonest. Still not under
this hotel, and I was pretty good friends with one of my coworkers who was kind of older than me. I was 19, and at the time she was about 28 years old, and we're gonna call her Jamie. Jamie seemed like a very professional woman. Like, she would hardly get into drama, and everybody loved her at work. And we were all super thankful to have her because she was also a really good worker. Now, Jamie was married and she had a son who was about 3 years old. And she would always brag about how her husband treated her so well, which was weird because, girl, if he treated you well, why did you cheat on him? Be so for real. Anyway, so there was this guy who was working in the dining room area and he was extremely fine. Like, when I tell you every girl wanted to get with him, every girl wanted to get with him. But somehow him and I clicked almost instantly. Fast forward a month, him and I start talking to each other. He even introduced me to his family, like for part 2. Part 2 about how my coworker cheated on her husband with my boyfriend. Anyways, like I said, we started talking and he introduced me to his friends, his family, and we would hang out constantly. And things got pretty serious. Eventually, we only were exclusively talking to each other. Fast forward about 3 months later, the news got around about him and I. And I vividly remember that some of the girls were annoyed that him and I were together, which is understandable because he was hot AF. But the person who was most mad was Jamie, and it was very obvious. She constantly made comments towards me about us. She would be like, oh, you two shouldn't be hanging around each other. You guys aren't going to look professional. All the girls are going to spread rumors. Like, girl, bye. You're 28 years old with a kid and a husband. Get a fucking life. And then whenever him and I would sit together at lunch, she would look at us with these nasty looks. Well, fast forward, the one night him and I are hanging out, and then eventually she follows him on all social medias. But I didn't care though because I thought he was loyal. After my boyfriend accepts it, not even 3 seconds later, she DMs him saying, hey, with a bunch of Ys, like for part 3. Part 3 about how my coworker cheated on her husband with my boyfriend. So like I said, she DMs him not even like 2 seconds later saying, hey, with a bunch of Ys, and we all know what that means. It's flirty. But she didn't answer him, so she kept spamming him. So fast forward, after him and I were dating for 7 months, we started growing apart. Like, we would spend hours without talking to each other. We stopped going out to the point where it was causing huge fights. And then a week later, a rumor starts going around that he and my coworker Jamie slept together. I found this hard to believe because I feel like people were just trying to break us up. But unfortunately, these rumors were true because I did receive some pictures of evidence of it actually happening. So obviously this caused me to get into a fight with them because I confronted them about it. And fast forward, in the end, both of them were fired and they aren't together anymore, which isn't a surprise. And I don't know what's going on with her and her husband, but whenever he found out, he stormed into the hotel and made a huge scene, as anyone probably would. And now they're both banned from even entering the hotel. Storytime about how my best friend and boyfriend slept with each other. So a little background information, I was 16 and in 10th grade. So this whole thing started 2 years ago whenever my crush asked me on a date, and then blah blah blah, we became official. And I decided to introduce him to my best friend Vivian. And we're gonna call my boyfriend Louise. So one day we're all in my room watching a movie and I went to go and grab some snacks, but I left the door open because I wanted to see what was happening in the movie. And while I'm in the kitchen, I see Louise staring at Vivian. Like, I was low-key weirded out because why are you doing that? Anyway, so then I went into the room and I felt this weird tension between them. So I stopped inviting my best friend to come over whenever we would hang out. And she got super mad at me for this. And Vivi and I would always pull pranks on each other. So the one day I call up her boyfriend John and I'm like, oh, we should say that we like each other. So we did, and she didn't care. Which maybe she just didn't think the prank was funny, but it was sus. So the next day I stop over at Vivian's house and she doesn't answer. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how I caught my boyfriend and my best friend sleeping together. So like I said, I kind of felt bad for this prank, so I went over to her house the next day and I knock on the door and she doesn't answer. So I go around to the back door of her house. And nobody was answering, so I looked through the window because the cars were there. And that's whenever I see her and my boyfriend doing it. Yup. So obviously I was pissed off, and I happened to have my boyfriend's house key, so I went to the Dollar Tree and bought 50 different nail polishes. And as you could probably guess, I went to his house and put nail polish all over his shit. His clothes, his shoes, everything. Even his walls. When I left, I asked John if we could meet and talk, and Wednesday we decided to confront them. And Louise and Vivian said that they had been dating, secretly, behind our backs. Way before me and Louise even started dating. There really is no moral to this story, to be honest. It's just that girls need to start following girl code more and not being fake. Storytime about my psychotic ex-girlfriend. So a little background information, I was 22 years old and I was working, and I had started dating this girl who we're going to call Maddie. And she told me that before we got together, she had been involved in a relationship with a minor, which kind of threw me off, but I decided to look past it. but I found it a little bit sus that she was still going to bonfires that were being thrown by high schoolers. But that's besides the point. Now, both her and I's families were not wealthy at all, but she ended up telling me that she was pregnant, so my family and I let her move in with us. From day one, my family tried warning me about this girl. They were like, yeah, Maddie leaves the house dressed provocatively. We just think it's weird that she's pregnant and she's not going out with you whenever she's dressed like this. Well, whenever my family told me about her leaving dressed like that, I called her, and she was claiming that she went to go and visit a family member. Later on, I found out that she was trying to cheat on me. After this caused us to have tons of arguments. This is whenever I realized this girl was psycho. My mom had offered to drive her and I to her ultrasound appointment, like for part 2. Story time about my psycho ex-girlfriend. So like I said, the one day my mom offers to drive us to her ultrasound appointment, so her and my mom come and pick me up, and my girlfriend Maddie's acting super strange. So my mom and I, we ask her, like, do you not want to go? Like, do you want to leave? And she's like, no, everything's fine. And then whenever we get to her appointment, so my mom and I are waiting in the waiting room. And then all of a sudden, 6 police officers rush into the doctor's office, and they're all standing around me with their hands on their guns. And they said that they were told by Maddie that I was holding her against her will, and a bunch of other shit that wasn't true. So when my mom explained to them what was going on, they let me go. But then later I found out that Maddie had called her mom asking her to call the cops just to say that, so that way she would be able to leave, because she was tired of dating me. So at this point, I'm like, whatever. Fast forward, she has the baby. And then she calls me and tells me that it's mine. Let me tell y'all something. She was pregnant way before her and I even started dating. Like for part 3. Part 3 about my psychotic ex. So like I said, the police pull up and then my mom tells them what actually happened, and we're like, all right, we're done with this. So fast forward, when the kid's born, she texts me and she's like, yo, the baby's yours. And I'm like, no, it's not. Because I'm going to be honest, y'all, she got pregnant way before her and I even got together. And if the baby was mine and she had it whenever she did, that baby would literally have came out without like nose, eyes, anything. So then she starts pulling me into a bunch of drama. She uses this guy to try and scare me. And he's like, oh, you're a deadbeat dad. I'm going to come and I'm going to F you up. And then I start getting mail at my house from her. One of them was from CPS. And then another one was that she had a warrant out for her arrest. So fast forward, I end up getting married to my wife, who I love so much. And she's still trying to start stuff with me. Y'all, this is 6 years after that whole situation. She keeps reaching out to my wife, trying to be friends with her. Also trying to tell her that that kid is mine because we have the same temper issues. It's just ridiculous.